Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be boarding the ghost train for a series of paranormal and ghostly events that I'm sure you will profoundly enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here for 3 videos every week at the same time, and download our app for 3,500 extra stories to listen to at your leisure with sound effects and cool Easter eggs and games and stuff. But with that being said, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My parents had me when they were in their early 20s, and they did not have their own place yet. When I was 4, they got married and we moved into our own house, but before that, I lived with my mum and grandparents at her house. Since I was very young, I used to sleep in the master bedroom, in a big bed sandwich between my mum and grandma. My grandpa used to sleep in the spare room. I'm not sure why grandma slept with us. My grandparents had a great relationship, but anyway. I vividly remember an elderly woman with curly red hair and a green dress talking to me every night. She would appear after my mum turned off all the lights and told me to sleep. This lady used to tell me to be quiet and to not make too much noise because my grandma and mum were very tired and needed their sleep so that they could take care of me tomorrow. She was always nice to me. She kept me in check and made sure I didn't annoy my mum or nan or woke them up. Sometimes she would sing to me. I was always in my own little world when she was talking to me, like she demanded all of my attention. My mum confirms that I used to tell her that I saw the woman with red hair again last night. She was a bit freaked out, but she assumed it was my own imagination, and when I grew up and still visited my grandmother, I stopped seeing her. I lived with my grandma for a few months after my grandpa died, and nothing unusual happened. But at age 16 I was doing my A-levels, and one time my mum came with me to the A-level art to make sure I wouldn't get lost finding the school it was going to be held in. There was this other girl who had been in my secondary school doing the same exam, and her father had driven her there. My mum and her dad recognized each other and were doing small talk. She was asking him where they lived. He told her that he lived in the same village my grandma lives in, and my mum told him the specific block of flats, as he lived nearby. He told her that people say they see a woman with curly red hair there, and paranormal stuff happens frequently. The description matched the one of the lady I used to see as a kid, and that really freaked me out for a long while. A few friends and I share a really big old Victorian-era house. During the first lockdown of the pandemic, I was the only housemate not working from home, meaning that in the mornings I'd be the only person up and about. One morning I walk downstairs and see the back door is wide open, and one of my other housemates is outside tidying up the garden. I saw him from the back, but I could be certain it was Andrew. I thought nothing of it, as he mentioned that he was returning to his office for a few days a week, as restrictions eased, and figured that it was why he was dressed quite smartly. White shirt, black trousers and shoes. Why he'd be tidying up the garden before he left for work I will never know, but my housemates being the people that they are, I was guessing he got drunk and trashed the place the night before and perhaps felt guilty about it. I made myself a tea and turned to leave the kitchen, not really looking up, and noticed in my peripheral vision him pass the kitchen doorway down the hall. When I turned into the hallway, however, a second later he was nowhere to be seen. A little strange, but it was early, so I thought nothing of it. The day continued and all was well. Later that night, when we were all hanging out, I asked Andrew about why he was tidying up the garden in the morning, and he hadn't a clue what I was talking about. He said to me that he had been into his office and didn't get up until long after I'd left. Then I mentioned that I saw him wearing a white shirt and smart trousers, and he freaked out a little bit, and confessed to me that he'd been keeping quiet about something he'd seen in the house, as he thought we'd take the piss out of him. According to him, he spotted a man exactly as I described standing in the living room as he passed by the door one night, but when he double-checked to see what he'd seen, the man was gone. Literally nothing else has happened in the house since. So, maybe perhaps a bit of a boring story, but I finally have a ghost story to share, so that's nice. I was finishing packing up the downstairs rooms. A little backstory. My mother-in-law can no longer live by herself and she came to live with us in February. Since then I have been going to her house to clear it and pack stuff up. First thing to know is that she's a hoarder. We have previously cleaned the house no less than 4 times. It's huge. We can fit 4.5 of our houses in hers. It needs major repairs and remodeling. Then we are all moving in. So it's been stressful. I'm the one usually taking care of her house. However, in the garage, it's under the house, there's a little room and it gives me the biggest creeps. I had a previous experience where an entity picked up a cord and dangled it in front of me, sort of saying like, "Hey, I'm here, you know, and I know." In the upstairs we hear bangs and knocks, and you can feel someone watching you. This time I was finishing the last 2 rooms in the basement. They're furnished rooms and there's 3 of them. I finished putting things in boxes to donate and bagging garbage. These rooms lead to the garage. I had gone to put the donation boxes in the garage and got the biggest chill up the back of my neck. Now I have been in and out of there most of the day and nothing like this has ever happened, so I nope the hell out of there in the garage and close and lock the door. As I get out to the game room I hear the doorbell, which doesn't work, and I ignore it because I want to get stuff done. Finally I go to the room closest to the front door and look up to see who's there. There's no one except Donna the cat looking down at me. It's a stray because the windows are high up. I can see the door and the doorbell is still ringing. I walk to the last room that leads upstairs and I'm standing next to the doorway deciding my next move, when all of a sudden a white figure walks past me in the game room. It was a male. Just everything a filmy white. It scared the pee-poo out of me. It took me by surprise. It didn't feel evil, it just strolled on past. I don't think it was the garage thing. It had a different feel. I didn't leave, but I wonder what other spirit will show itself now. I did finish my work and left the boxes and baggie for the husband to deal with though. This happened around 4 years ago, in a house where I lived with my mum and brother. My mum and brother still live there. An old couple died in this house before we moved in. There is a small basement which me and my dad decorated so it's my extra room. The basement has a separate door from the outside. One day, I was chilling in the basement with my friend watching some movies. We were home alone. My mum was at work until 8 p.m. We told her to bring us some snacks, and when she returned it was 8:15. When we heard the main door of the house opening and steps going from the living room to the kitchen, and chairs moving, the normal noises you'll hear when someone is upstairs. We both heard it and I was like, "My mum came home." And he said, "Yeah, I hear it, snacks are here." A few minutes later my phone rings. It's my mum and I was like, "Okay, probably she's calling so that we can come and get the snacks." I answer and she says, "I'm stuck at work, probably be home at 10, problems with security." I was speechless. I looked at my friend and he was shaking. He heard my mum through the phone. I had one key to the house, my mum had the other. My brother was at my grandparents' place, no one else had a key and there were only 2. So we went upstairs to the main door. It was locked. The lights were out. I opened and we searched the house. Nothing. That's weird. We just left it as it was. There were no chairs moved even though we both heard them moving, and it still gives me chills even thinking about it. I heard a lot of steps and movement upstairs when I was alone in the basement, but didn't think much of it since only I heard it. But as my friend heard it too, I'm starting to think that everything else I heard was also true, and not just a figment of my imagination. My house has an open kitchen and living room. The front door is facing the kitchen. As I was walking in, I saw what I thought was my roommate's boyfriend ducking down behind the kitchen counter, doing something to spook me that didn't seem too unusual for him as he's a bit of a prankster. So I laughed and said something like, "Nice try, I saw you duck down." After a moment of silence, a super weird feeling washed over me, and I quickly walked over the kitchen and past the counter to see that no one was there. I walked down into the basement, and him and my roommate were down there watching a movie. The spot I saw this figure duck down was the furthest spot in the room from any door, so it wouldn't have been possible for him to duck down and then sneak out of the room, because he would have to go past the counter right to where I was standing to do so. This isn't the first spooky thing I've experienced in my house. Hearing glass shattering inside with no known source, stuff falling off walls, appliances acting weird. My husband has seen dark figures, but none of this was in our current home. This is the only house I lived in recently that I actually feel not creeped out in. Like I can go out to the kitchen in the middle of the night for water and not even turn lights on. But I still often think of this person I saw ducking down to hide. These all happened at the same house, which was an old farmhouse that was also a part of the Underground Railroad. We no longer live there. The house isn't there anymore. It's a very expensive neighborhood. My parents said they were sitting on the couch watching TV. The fireplace shutter opened and closed several times of its own accord, which scared them. On another occasion, my mum was sitting in the same living room. Towards her front was a large wooden deck that had a fireplace in the center and two large windows on either side. To the right was a concrete porch that ran the length of the side of the house. It had a door off the side that had several large windows on it as well. To her back was a bedroom that us kids shared in the winter because it was easier to heat half the house. To her left was the blue room. The whole thing was blue, but it was just a central room where our computer happened to be and had access to the basement. On the wooden deck, my mum saw a black figure. It was tall as a bear, but too thin to be human. She said she looked at it and had a feeling that it was watching her. It wasn't completely dark outside, but it was on its way. The figure then started doing laps around the house. It would pass the windows in front of her every few seconds. This was a 2,500-ish square foot farmhouse. It was incredibly fast. We had a small family farm. Chickens, goats, pigs, quail, turkey, ducks, etc. Nothing big. We had about 30 chickens at the time. Living that far out in the country, we always set up traps by the coop to catch opossums and raccoons. Anything that ate chickens. Well, we go outside one day and see piles of feathers throughout the yard and around the coop. Every single pile had a head on top of it. 30-ish piles. And that many heads. No piles of blood. No insides anywhere. Just piles of feathers and heads. As you can imagine, that in particular we found quite disturbing. Shortly after this, my dad would go out at night with a shotgun to see if we could find anything. We had gotten more chickens and had nothing unusual in the traps. Just cages. My dad was a manly man who wasn't afraid of anything. I've seen him move a tree by himself out the road that 4 grown men weren't able to together. He's tough to say the least. So he goes out like he usually does. Our chicken coop sits about 50-ish feet in front of our garage. It was really just an 1,000 square foot ranch outbuilding. We just called it the garage. So we hear 5 blasts from the shotgun very shortly after. My dad comes through the front door with tears running down his face. He is visibly shaking. After he calms down a bit, he explains that while in front of the garage he heard a real guttural growl coming from the tree line right behind him above the garage. He says it wasn't like anything he heard before in his life, as he was an avid hunter growing up. He's heard and probably eaten just about any animal that Indiana has to offer. He said it was low and demonic, and he could feel that it was evil. So he immediately unloaded the shotgun for good measure and ran to the house. At another point, I would hear voices in the house. One night I woke up my parents crying to let them know that the devil wanted my soul and wouldn't stop trying to get me to give it to him. I don't remember much about it because I was in 5th grade. I'm 31 now and have since been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. I can see that this might have just been my anxiety, but I definitely remember sitting on the living room floor and sobbing at 3 a.m, just begging for the voices to stop. I haven't heard anything else since, and nothing like this has ever happened to me again. There's also the time my parents found a tunnel in our basement that we assumed was part of the Underground Railroad. My cousin was over at the time and asked if we could explore it. It was covered up, about shoulder height to an adult, and an adult could crawl through with not a whole lot of extra room. He had a flashlight and was gone for about a half hour. We started getting very worried when we would see the light again. He came back and said that there had not been an end in sight, but they were getting nervous having crawled so far. They were probably 16. We always had dogs, and we would find our dogs in front of the house just dead. No wounds, prior symptoms, just dead. Sometimes 3 at a time. My dad, on his way home from work, saw a pile of dead dogs in our field by our house, probably about 5 feet tall. No joke. Have you ever seen a ton of freaking dogs? Unless a local vet with loads of dead dogs decided to just launch them into our field. How the hell did they get there? My 2 brothers and I were in the house, and things started to fall off the walls. We ran outside into the field in front of our house, and looking across the street to the other cornfields. There were hundreds of deer just running. It filled the field for several minutes. Enough disruption caused by them made it look like we were experiencing a small earthquake. After we moved out, we found out that there was a practicing coven that met not far from our house, and we heard a lot of dead animal remains had been found. A decent amount of years later, I went with my sister to Chicago. Her fiancé had graduated boot camp and was going to A school. They do a ceremony thing for the family with their group flag and such. They hang out for a bit and then they leave for A school. On the way home, I was asleep in the car and my sister had gotten lost. I shot up out of sleeping and told my sister to pull over. She did, and I told her to turn. She asked me what's wrong, and I said that I woke up because we were by our old house. I could feel it. She made a turn, and we passed the front gates of a cemetery that was right by the house. Had she kept by that direction, she would have passed right by it. What was at the start of all of this was a dream that my sister had. I think we had some dogs die before this point, but we didn't find out about the coven until several years after we moved. I didn't find out about the dream until I was in high school. Surrounding the end of the property, there was a tree line that separated where the coven met and our house. My sister said that in her dream, there were monsters tearing down the tree line, and that she knew if they tore it down, they were coming for me. Like, me, not my sister or any other of the 5 people in my family, me specifically. But not long after, in preparation of turning the property into a subdivision, they tore down the tree line. All of the stuff happened. My parents decided one day that enough was enough. We were moving, and we had a house purchase on contract and were completely moved out in 2 weeks' time. And now I bring you to the pièce de résistance. I was in Boy Scouts, and it was the time of year for popcorn. I sold enough popcorn to be the top in the state. That's what my parents told me, at least. I just knocked on doors and pushed the popcorn. My parents had just loaded up the van with all the popcorn we were going to deliver for the following morning. It was an old brown/tan Astro van, the ones with the weird curtain in the windows. This thing was completely stuffed with popcorn. We all go to sleep, and I remember being outside with my family, looking at our van on fire. The fire department came and everything. The thing burnt completely. While my dad had a Polaroid camera and took a picture. My dad takes the picture with him and shows people because it's crazy. My dad's showing a guy the picture and the dude asks him if he sees the face. My dad looks at the picture and sees a face. To summarize this, because I don't want to make up details I don't remember, things started appearing in the picture, like in the flames. It started with a face that turned into a demonic-looking Grim Reaper type of figure. Then people started to notice more things as my dad showed it to others. My dad would hand the picture around and ask people what they saw. Everyone saw it. Then people noticed that the figure was holding what appeared to be a chain attached to a torn-apart dog, and a burning cross behind it. As soon as people started seeing that, my dad stuffed the picture in a Bible. It was a Bible that had a built-in zipper, and he didn't tell any of us about him stuffing it in a Bible until after we moved. He pulls out the Bible while we're moving, and the picture is simply gone. He was really freaked out. I remember my dad always handling the picture with people and then being creeped out, and I remember seeing the fire. I saw the picture once right after he'd taken it, and I remember playing on the burnt-up van because it was late in the 90s and we were kids. The rest of it is what my parents have talked about. My dad was a server at the same restaurant for about 25 years, so he showed it to a ton of people. This wasn't just a few buddies. He literally began handing it out to customers. Everyone saw the same thing. This is everything I can remember. I tried to be as detailed as I could, and I'm aware that some of it isn't very believable, but it's true. The address of the house was 18401 SR 238 Fortville, IN. I don't remember the zip code. The house is no longer there, and it's now a subdivision of houses that are 750k plus houses. They didn't end up tearing it down until after we'd been gone 4 to 5 years, but that's just a guess. In order to tell you this story, I have to go back many years before it. My grandma bought a house in Salt Lake City in a suburb in the 1960s, after her and my grandpa had their first child together, and she believes the home had been haunted since day one. She says that even though it was clear early on that something was in the house, she never felt that she needed to leave. She said it was her home now, and that whoever was there was welcome to stay as long as they understood and appreciated the rules. Other than one story, it appears that all ghostly residents at Grandma's house followed the rules and never gave her a reason to evict them. Over the years, Grandma welcomed more children to the home, and it became a safe haven for my entire family. The home is a one-story home with a downstairs living area. The upstairs has a living room, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. The kitchen leads to a set of stairs leading to the basement with 3 or 4 rooms. We use the home for most family gatherings, and many of us have used it as a temporary residence once or twice. Much of the family has experienced something unusual in the home, and it's commonly blamed on the ghosts. 2 of my grandma's stories are the reason that I have one of my own. My grandpa died in 1999. Several months after his death, my grandma was in her kitchen doing the dishes. She felt a strange feeling come over her, like she needed to leave the house. She later attributed the feeling to my grandpa warning her of danger. Before she could even finish her thought, she had a sensation that something very strong was grabbing her from behind and trying to force her downstairs. She couldn't see anyone, but she felt something powerful try to force her. She states she fought the power very hard and managed to make it to her kitchen table. She sat at the table and held onto it, while this violent entity pulled and groped her, but she would not let go. Finally it stopped and no one was there. The house was again silent and peaceful. She said she'd never been so scared in all her life. My grandma is a tough old lady, but you could tell this really shook her deeply. While telling me this story at the same kitchen table, she told me of a little ghost girl that lives in her basement, or she may not. She said the little girl likes to play pranks on people, like pulling the blankets off while people are sleeping, or hiding things in the house. Grandma says she knew it was the girl because of the laughter. She would giggle mischievously, so she knew it was her. She seemed peaceful, and like she just wanted someone to play with. One day my mom was doing laundry downstairs while she was living there during her separation from my dad, and she says that she saw what appeared to be the hazy outline of a tiny person. She says that she said hello with a nervous laugh, and then the haze disappeared. To this point, I had never experienced anything scary or ghostly in the home. After hearing the stories, I was creeped out being in any room alone, but still nothing more than a spooky feeling and an embarrassing sprint up the stairs every time it happened. Again to that point now, flash forward a few years to the exact same kitchen table, only subtract my grandma and add my mother and 2 of my friends, Brad and Ashley. We're all sitting around talking and planning out our evening. My friends and I had no money, so we settled into an evening at Grandma's house with my mum. Not exactly my idea of fun. At one point we began telling ghost stories, and my mum and I decided to tell my friends about the house of horrors that we were currently sitting in. My mum told me about the little girl. She too had an experience with her, so it made sense for my mum to tell it. The girl's story was met with enjoying but disbelieving eyes, so when it was my turn to tell about Grandma's dishes incident with the little girl, I was not surprised to see the same reaction on my friends' faces. The "I call BS" look. Next, as if almost on cue, the cheap yet expensive-looking chandelier that hung above my grandma's table exploded. I'm not talking about a blown bulb. I'm talking about 4 light bulbs actually exploding. Glass went everywhere. After a few moments of looking around at each other, we all decided we needed to leave. After tripping all over each other in an attempt to save ourselves, we managed to make it outside safely. We all left the house within minutes. My mum went home, and my friends and I got intoxicated. The ghostly pyrotechnics were of course the talk of the evening. Even now I recall this as being the most spooked out I've ever been, as we discussed what happened with some other friends we met up with that night. I began to notice that familiar BS look on their faces, but needless to say, Brad and Ashley believed. I was probably about 20 years old, in Vancouver, British Columbia. It was a Sunday, and I'd just met this girl I had a super crush on at a coffee shop. We had a nice visit, and I wanted to ask her out, but I chickened out. Vancouver is a pretty busy city if you've not been there, but this day it was oddly quiet. I was walking down the street. I was at the light, waiting to cross the road. The light changed, and the little red hand turned into the "you're safe to cross" guy. At that point, I had some severe mental confusion that I'd never had before. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I had this weird little debate with myself. So in my mind I said, should I walk? I think so. The little man is walking, which means I'm safe, right? I mean, it was the hand, which means stop, and then it was not the walking guy, so does that mean I can go? I was dumbfounded. Then I debated to myself the red and green aspect and said to myself, the light was red but is now green. Green means go and the little man is going, so I should be able to go, right? Now, I am not a rule follower type, and there was almost no traffic, so I would have never had this insane debate with myself. I would have simply looked both ways and crossed the street, but instead I had this weird internal confusion. I took one step into the intersection, and a Suburban ran the red light and sped through the intersection. It was like they were being chased by cops, but there was no one. I would have been right in front of that car. Had it not been for the confusion by the lights, I'd have been 100% dead. The last story is something I swear is true. Maybe there's some other explanations. I'll let you decide. I used to deliver candy to vending machines as a job. I was on Vancouver Island, and basically, there is only one road that connects most of it. I was coming from Victoria and going up island. I was coming up the summit of the road and just short of cresting the hill when I heard this massive bang. It was the loudest bang I'd ever heard in my life, and then there was this massive cloud of dust in front of me. I naturally slowed down to a crawl. Then the dust was moving in this weird pattern, and the cloud directly in front of my vehicle was being blown across the road. It's hard to explain, but imagine a 50-foot wall of thick dust in front of you, and then the bottom 10 feet of the wall being blown across the road in front of you, while the other 40 was just kind of hanging across the air. Anyway, I was just coasting slowly, and kind of driving up to where the clouds were blowing, and another voice in my head that wasn't mine said, pretty damn loudly as well, "Shut off your engine and roll through the cloud." I almost pissed my pants. I was so shocked, but I did what the voice said. I shut it off and put it in neutral and rolled through the cloud on the other side. So what happened was a propane delivery tank had plowed into the mountainside. We found later the driver was drunk. The top of the tank, the safety valve, had been blown off, and it was propane that was blowing the dust across the road. I think the voice in my head was getting me to shut off my engine, to stop anything from igniting the propane, which obviously would have ended super badly. I didn't smell any of that propane stank, but someone later told me the sulfur scent is added later so that people can tell there's a gas leak. The whole road was shut down for a day or two after that. Anyway, to me, this was 100% real in each instance. I do not normally hear voices in my head. I have no doubt, in each of these situations I could have died. So on one hand, I feel like my life has been saved repeatedly for some reason. But on the other hand, I'm just some jerk who's not really doing anything useful with my life to warrant such intervention. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll save the world. Here's to hoping, and thanks for listening. This happened about 2 years ago, but it still sends chills down my spine whenever I think of it. There's a local factory that was made in 1890, and it opened in 1891 as a sewing factory where people handcrafted detachable collars and cuffs. In 1999, it was repurposed as a bunch of little consignment shops throughout the whole building in each room. Today, there is still the original huge elevator shaft with rickety gated doors. One night, me and my friend decided to go and check out one of the bookshops that just opened up there. We headed downstairs, went and left the store, and eventually took a break on one of the benches before leaving. To our knowledge, no one else was in the building, or at least in the basement with us. So we're sitting there, and the way the bench is positioned is flat up against the wall, where you can see all the way up the hallway, with the flight of stairs to our right, and one of the shops to our left. While we're sitting there and talking, I started feeling this uncomfortable feeling, and tried telling my friend I wanted to leave to hurry up, because I just didn't like this feeling. He told me to calm down, and that we'd leave in a minute, and the uncomfortable feeling went away. As we were about to get up and go, we saw someone come around the corner and start approaching us. We figured it was the maintenance worker, but that feeling of uncomfortableness came over me again. Yet, worse this time. Now the way he turned the corner was completely unnatural. He walked to the end of the hallway, stared at the wall in front of him for a solid 5 seconds, and then turned towards us and took a brief pause before coming our way. The way he turned the corner though, it seemed as if he knew we were there, and was completely unfazed when he saw us. I would say that's plausible, but we were being fairly quiet, and the hallway was a solid 30 to 40 feet long, so we'd have to be talking decently loud for him to hear us. I went into panic mode, but my friend kept their cool. The place was still open. We weren't breaking any rules, just sitting on this bench. My friend calmly looked at him and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And the man didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards us at a somewhat rapid pace. I remember looking at him in the eyes. He had zero expression, not anger, not happiness, nor confusion, just nothing. It was severely unsettling. Even after my friend said something to him completely unfazed, he was just on a mission to get us. You'd assume if this was a maintenance worker, he'd either tell us it's time to leave or say hi back or something, anything. But nope, just this blank, expressionless face making his way towards us. After he didn't respond to my friend and started getting close to us, we just gave each other this "we need to go" look and sprinted out of there. When we got out of the building and down the road, the uncomfortable feeling left me and I started calming down. We didn't really talk about what just happened. We just went on our way back to my house. Ever since that night, I haven't been back to the factory or any of the shops there. Something about the man wasn't right, and it sent a chill down my spine seeing him, and it sends chills down my spines just typing this out. I'm a firm believer of the paranormal, and I can just about guarantee that what we saw that night wasn't human. The first story takes place a few months ago, when I was playing with my Oculus Quest 2. I live in a 2-story house, and when you come up the stairs, you enter into the main room. Next to the stairs is a wall with a door into the bathroom. The rest of the rooms are on different walls, and are bedrooms and a closet. As the main room is wide open space, it was the perfect place for me to play Quest 2. I was positioned in the center of the room, and the bathroom was to my left. Any Quest 2 owners will be familiar with the pass-through feature. For anyone unfamiliar with this feature, it basically lets you see into reality with the camera of the front of the headset. The cameras aren't in color, and the quality is a bit grainy. So I was playing Quest 2 with my stepbrother when he goes downstairs to do something. My sister is in her room and I'm completely alone in the main room. My Quest Hub virtual environment is set to pass through so that I can see the room I'm in. I was about to open a game when out of my peripheral vision I see what appears to be a head peeking at me from around the bathroom doorway. The head appears to be white with no facial features, although I couldn't tell its color, as pass-through doesn't show color. I turned my head towards it to get a better view out of my head, but it slipped back into the bathroom. I couldn't play Quest 2 again that night. The next story is when my family was getting ready for our camping trip, and I was grabbing my bag which was next to the bathroom door. The door was to my right, and again out of my peripheral vision I saw movement in the bathroom. I turned to look at whatever created this movement, but there was nothing there. It couldn't have been a family member because they were all downstairs. So far I've seen this bathroom dweller a number of times. My only theory is that it's a ghost. My house is very old, and it would make sense if a previous resident of the house passed away and their spirit lingers for whatever reason. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, though. I have a story that happened around 15 years ago. I'm 40 now, a native from Beaver Lake, Cree Nation, number 131, Northern Alberta. During the winter months, the reserve has round dances. Once summer has gone and all the powwows are done, fall comes in, followed by Old Man Winter. It's about late October now. There was a round dance going on. Pretty much everyone goes from different reserves around the province. Drummers, singers, dancers, 50-50s, and prizes and giveaways at the end of the night. Usually by 4 AM it's all over. I had decided not to go. I always go, but I was on a 4:20 mission this night. It was getting dark. I had borrowed my cousin's bike to do this mission, since I was living with them, after I had a falling out with my estranged family. I don't have anything to do with them to this day, still, some 15 years later. I also need to say that it is true. Natives have medicine that can summon or bring creatures from another realm. The natives have a word for this. I don't know what it is, nor how it's spelled. But from my understanding, this little man or creature is called an up-chi-nis, meaning little man or being. So I was sitting on the deck of my uncle's home. You see, I was making my way home, and I just happened to look to my right, where my other uncle's house was. I can't explain the reason why I looked, but I did, which I instantly regretted doing, since I had seen an up-chi-nes years before. They only come around when you're doing bad things apparently, such as drinking, smoking, or drugs, or just being an overall complete arse and making life hard. Needless to say, I pedaled harder and faster. It was hard though. My cousin's bike was one of those Harley bikes with the big wheels built like a Harley but with pedals. If you have strong legs, it's not a problem. And I got scared because of my own experience with this little man creature. Some stories depict it as a 3-foot tall, sometimes solid black mass, other times describing it with little horns on its forehead, like a satyr. I made it home, but did not tell even my uncle or the family that I lived with. We call him Napiyu. In Cree, it means the man. My uncle is a medicine man. He taught me how to do it as well. The next day I asked around with my cousins to see if they were home, and I got a response that made me feel pale and weak at the knees. No one was home, telling me that all of them went to the round dance the night before. After this I explained what I saw, mistaking an up-chi-nes for my little cousin. I don't know what became of it, but to watch him jump off the rail to the deck and into the house with no lights or nothing was enough to make me go home so fast. What went on in that house I still don't know, but I'm guessing something bad. I know this since my other uncle was not a medicine man, but very mischievous, and would leave you with his kids while he and his wife would go off gallivanting, basically having a great time at my expense. I'm married now. It's been 14 years, and I'm happy. I haven't seen the creature again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. As always, I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's collection of stories. I always love me a good ghost story. I think they are some of my favorites. Well, sorry, I just had to click. I really hope everyone is having a fantastic day. And, a good rest of the week ahead with the weekend coming up. If you made it this far and you're not subscribed, it's time to question your life choices and think about subscribing to Mortis Media for those sweet 3 videos a week. I can't believe I used to do daily videos. The grind was insane. If any of you remember that long ago, it's not that long ago really, but do you remember when a video would come out every single day on this channel? That was just madness. I swear there's only so much you can do before you really and truly burn out. I think 3 videos a week is a very comfortable and achievable thing to do. Don't forget I have a second channel called Mr. Knox where you can find even more content. Basically, I'm just trying to non-stop produce content. Watch my content. I think I'm going to leave things here though, just by saying a huge thank you to everyone listening. It really means a lot. Thank you for making it to the end. If you want to watch more, you can click on one of these videos here and press the middle button to subscribe. And as always, a huge thanks to my members and patrons whose names are on screen for your help and support. It really does mean a lot. But for now, guys, take care, stay awesome, and I will see you in the next one.